This is Miguel from Dicecraft, and what we're gonna do is talk about how to get a super polished dice like this one, and especially when you're starting with raw dice. So that's gonna be dice that are just like straight out of the mold. These are gonna be the types of dice I'll be selling along with the finished dice in my website. And what we're gonna be using is this little kit that I'll be posting on the website as well. And it'll basically be a set of sandpapers, a set of Sandpapers, so these are going to be polishing papers, and then a little bit of polish. So what does finishing mean? You'll see some of these dice are already finished. That's how they come out of a mold like this when you started with a finished die to begin with. But what happens though is a few things. One is you'll get little marks like this because of the mold, striations like that, or in some cases you'll get things that are poking out a little bit. Like here, for instance, the inclusion there is poking out. The other big thing is the edges on some of these dice. So that's going to be based on the cap. So this is a cap mold. This is just for a single dice. Usually these are done in like a larger mold with the whole set in it. But most of the dice will have this little lip on the edge. Sometimes it'll be not as pronounced as this one, but then other times it'll be much more marked just because of like issues with the edge of the mold. So these are going to be the phases that you're going to finish. It'll be the top one usually, and then in the case of dice like these that have the side phases messed up, you probably want to finish those as well. And the raw dice that I'll be selling are going to have most of these things removed. If they don't, clippers. If you don't have clippers, you could also use an X-Acto blade or a box cutter. But basically, you're trying to get like a little bit of a flattened face so that then we can start sanding that face down. So that's what I'll show you in the video right now. In terms of things that we're gonna use, it's gonna be the kit that got sent out if you bought one, and polishing compound, and then a couple Sandpapers that we'll get to in a little bit. And the only things you're gonna need are gonna be water, flat surface. So in this case, I'm using a mirror just because it's gonna be guaranteed flat. I would recommend not using wood or anything that's textured because that's gonna telegraph to the dice. But if you've got a face that's like this, you're gonna wanna start earlier in the sanding. So in this case, we've got a 600, and then these are gonna go all the way up to 2500 in different steps. So 600 to 1000 to 1500, 2000, 2500. In the case of dies like this, you're gonna wanna start with the 600. If you've got something that's maybe a face that you wanna touch up that doesn't really have too many details that need to be fixed, you could probably start a little bit further up, either the 1000 or the 1500. And then if you're doing matte dice, you probably only need to go up to the 2000. You could probably go up to 2500 if you want a little bit more clarity in there. But usually these, it's the same thing that you need to finish the face, but you don't need to go all the way through to full polish. So some of these are easier to finish because of that. So starting with the 600 paper, what we're gonna do is wet it down a little bit. I usually wet the back so that it sticks to the glass, and then you wet the top. You could also use masking tape, but then that's gonna get a little bit messy. So I usually tend to just hold it with one hand. And then essentially what you're gonna do is you're gonna rub this, and I'll do it separately here. Rub it in the paper in a circular motion like this. You wanna make sure that you're putting equal pressure on all sides so that the face is totally flat against the surface. Because if you lean it one way like this, you'll start sort of cutting off the vertex of it. So flat face, you put it down flat and you go around in circles. So we're gonna do that with this sandpaper maybe about like 30 times. You'll usually realize that it doesn't have scratches because it'll be like pretty evenly sanded when you get to that point. So let's go through that. So that's 30 specifically. You'll notice there's a little bubble that came up. That's gonna happen with some of these when there's like minor surface bubbles. It's usually really hard to patch those up, so don't even worry about it. This looks fairly even, I would say. So I'll actually go through and do the 20 side, but basically all of these steps you should do for all these faces for this die. For other dice where you don't necessarily have issues on the sides, you would just do the top side. So you would go through all the papers with the top side. So that's the first face. We'll move that over. 1,000. See that it'll get progressively finer and finer, and like you'll start being able to see a little bit of clarity into the die itself. So I'm going to 1500. Now we're going to go to the 2000. So at this point, if you were to stop, you're kind of getting the matte finish. But we're gonna go up a few more levels. The last sandpaper here is gonna be the 2500. Then we're gonna hit the Sonas, or some of the Sonas at least. So you'll see that the issues on this face are still there, obviously, because we haven't sanded that face down. But this face is gonna come out really flat after we're done with this. So now we're gonna move over to the Sona paper. For that, we're gonna use two different papers. So Sona papers are mesh papers like this. So they're measured in microns instead of the regular gauge for sandpaper. And they come in a long series like this. I'm actually missing this one here, but it's these 6 different papers. We're not gonna use all of them because what we did with the sandpapers right now with these over here got us maybe closer to this side here. So we're actually gonna start with the red one, and then we're gonna do the white one with some polishing compound. So this is a polishing compound that came in the pack. If you're interested in more of this or wanna dig into what it is, it's Plastics by Meguiar's, and it's pretty good for getting that sort of final touch on the die. So we'll start with the red one, and we'll actually probably soak that in almost entirely. So you'll see that it really holds on to the glass like that. So you see that starts getting a little bit of sheen, starts looking a little bit clear. You can see the light above reflecting, so similar to how you see it here, you can start seeing that here. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna dry this off a little bit. We're not gonna use the water for the other polishing step, but what we're gonna do is just use the compound by itself with the white paper. So this is the white Sona paper. This is the polishing compound, Plastex. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take a little bit of this and then dab it on the face of the die. Then we're gonna run it like the other ones through the paper. And we might need to do that maybe 2 passes, but let's see. This is probably much better to tape down than just to hold it up like this, but. So you can see how it starts really getting that shine that we're looking for. So just do a little bit more. You also don't necessarily need to do circles. You could also just go up and down with this one, because at this point you're not going to make any marks. And then definitely tape this. I just don't have any tape with me. So now that's totally polished up. One other alternative to this, instead of doing the paper, if you have a Dremel with one of these attachments, you could also do the step where you put the polish on here and then you hit it with this. The only thing is, don't use this without polish, because it's gonna totally destroy the face of the die. So make sure that you do small strokes, just do a little bit, and then if it looks like it dried up, grab more polish and then throw it back on there. Up to you, when you have a raw die, how far you want to go with polishing the faces. So in this case, I would do this one, I would do this one, this one, this one, and then if there's any of them that had a lot of marks or striations, some of those things I would probably just leave on there, just because I don't think it's a huge issue. That one, for instance, I would definitely redo. And then if you're doing matte dice, you don't take it all the way to here or to here. What you would do is stop at the 2000. If you stop at the 2000, you're gonna get sort of this finish. You could certainly take a matte die like this all the way to polished through here with all the faces, but that's probably gonna be a ton of extra work. And then when you get this finished up, it should just basically shine all over. So you can see how that one has flattened faces for the most part, very little marks, but still polished up. So some of these you could still do if you don't finish and sand, but just want to hit it with the white paper with a little bit of polish. You're going to be able to brighten that up, although it's already coming out fairly polished from the mold. All right, that's it. Once you finish all the faces on the die, this hasn't been finished, this is the same die from before, you'll need to clean up the residue from the resin, as well as a little bit of polish that might have been left in there. Now, the easiest way to do that is give your die a little bit of a soak. This is probably gonna be all of the faces that were finished. Just make sure that those are soaked up. And then I use this little scrubber, but you could use an old toothbrush, or if you want to use like your kitchen scrubber, if you're not going to use it anymore for the kitchen. But basically, you just want to be able to get in there and just like scrub it out. So if you wait a long time after you've done this, everything's going to dry up and it'll be much harder to get that out. But if you do it pretty soon after, it'll be pretty easy to do. Usually what I'll do is I'll use an ultrasonic cleaner. So I might do maybe a separate video on that, but what I'll do is I'll just take all of the dice that I finished and then I'll just chuck them all inside a ultrasonic cleaner. That's it.